Well, I've always tried to do what I could, especially in the world of art.
Art. Well, I don't know how we drifted around to that, but what is your opinion of art?
I am very glad you asked me.
I withdraw the question.
Welcome to the Marx Brothers Council podcast, episode 11, Art is Art and Water is Water. For this discussion of the Marx Brothers and surrealism, some absurd introductions for your ridiculous hosts. Matthew Coniam is a dolphin wearing a derby. He hails from the lawnmower region of Dentist. In 1685, he built a house out of soup, which is now known as the Marx Brothers. Matthew.
And the joke's on Noah, because that is actually all entirely true. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second year as international broadcasters. They said it wouldn't last. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Bob Gasell is a Yiddish expression meaning bless yourself, or literally, where's my hat? This year alone, there have been over 7,000 reported instances of Bob Gasell, including the popular hot and spicy variety. Good morning, Bob.
Yeah, you're giving me flashbacks to days in the dormitory in college here.
It feels like yesterday. Noah Diamond couldn't be here today, so this is also Bob Gasell. I'll be doing Noah's voice as well as my own for the duration of this episode. And since he's our special guest, how about a legitimate introduction for Mr. Josh Frank? He is the co-author and principal creative force behind Giraffes on Horseback Salad, the graphic novel adaptation of Salvador Dali's proposed Marx Brothers film, available in March from Quirk Books. Hey, I use Quirk Books to handle my household finances. And pre-orderable right now on the Amazon machine. Mr. Frank is also the author of books about the band The Pixies and the composer Peter Ivers, and he owns and operates the Blue Starlight Mini-Urban Drive-In Movie Theater in Austin, Texas.
Which is the only place that this film is actually showing at the moment.
Welcome aboard, Josh.
Thank you very much, but Josh Frank couldn't be here today. I'm Denzel Washington, and I weigh $195.
You'll fit right in.
Great.
Well, before we get into the deep waters of surrealism, let's talk about this book, Giraffes on Horseback Salad, Josh Frank's new adaptation of the Salvador Dali Marx Brothers movie that never was until now.
What's this?
Salvador who?
So in the 1930s, Salvador Dali was a big fan of the Marx Brothers. He considered them sort of the penultimate embodiment of surrealism, you know, and in human form, particularly Harpo. And he decided that he had to meet Harpo. And at a party in Paris, while Harpo was on a press tour of Night at the Opera, and they develop a back and forth through they write letters, and Dali sends Harpo a surrealist harp that's covered in cellophane, and the strings are barbed wire. Harpo writes him back saying, "Love the gift. I'd be happy to be smeared by you. Painted by you." And Dali took that as an invitation and went overseas and painted Harpo, and they spent some time together in Hollywood and at Harpo's home with Susan and Gala, and it was there that Dali told Harpo that he wanted to write a surrealist movie starring Harpo and his brothers. And he spent a period of time writing a treatment that was sort of based on an earlier idea about this surrealist woman, and it became named Giraffes on Horseback Salad. And they even got as far as taking it in to show to the producers at MGM, and
That's when Irving Thalberg dropped dead.
Yeah, and then it ended there, and Dali went back home, and for many years after that, it was sort of like his white whale, and so yeah. But there wasn't a lot online about about the story, but I had this sort of hunch that if I sort of dug a little deeper, that maybe I could find more material that would sort of shed light on what he had intended. And I spent a couple of years basically searching through archives and museums in Europe, and eventually came across some stuff that hadn't been published before. One of which was like 80 pages of handwritten notes that I had translated, and went to work on adapting into a screenplay, with the idea that I would then take that screenplay and turn it into a graphic novel. And that is how Giraffes on Horseback Salad came to be in the modern day.
Let's get your Marx Brothers origin story. How did you fall in love with the brothers, and what do they mean to you?
Well, one of the cool things from getting into this book and joining the council and kind of hearing what a lot of people have said about their Marx Brothers origin stories, it's really very comforting and cool to see that there's a lot of origin story connections, like I thought I was the only one in the world who, at age 9 or 10, went to the JCC Jewish Book Fair and discovered, that they had Marx Brothers books. And I thought I was the only one that, discovered, at midnight, the local TV stations would play Marx Brothers movies. And, these are the ways that I, was brought into that world at a young age, and with that said, I was the only one in my community, well, I had two other really good friends, Greg and Michael Waghalter, and the three of us became obsessed with the Marx Brothers, when we were 9 or 10 years old. But at that time, pre-internet, you're just kids. You really think that you're the only oddball kids in the world that are doing this, because none of your peers, they're all obsessed with buying the Camel Cigarette Guy T-shirts, and
sorry to interrupt you there. Did you say Michael Waghalter?
Waghalter.
Michael Waghalter. That guy had no choice. I bet he had a middle initial.
Right. It's true.
Sounds like he's a disgrace to the family name of Waghalter.
Right.
Anything is possible.
No, it's true. I mean, he was the closest, and he resembled Groucho and he. Yeah, and so the three of us really were the little Marx Brothers, and but yeah, the point is that my origin was very, I was one of the only ones in Houston, Texas growing up that had these experiences that I knew of, but watching the cast, listening to the cast and joining in further into the Marx Brothers community since I started working on the book, it's neat to see how many more how there's this subset of people that had sort of a similar awakening, and when I was 12 or 13, Bill Marx, Harpo's son, came through town on a tour of the U.S. He was touring with his piano and with this woman who played harp, and my parents took me to see him. And, it was like meeting a Beatle for me,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was sort of the beginning of it. And, I tried out Chaplin, and I tried out Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges, and I enjoyed them more than a 9-year-old should, probably. But the Marx Brothers always were, the ultimate for me. They spoke to me in a way no others did. And I think it's probably because, as an artist, I was drawn to surrealism. I was drawn to absurdity, and that definitely is what fueled my movement as an artist over the years, and I think I mentioned this in the introduction to the book, but I recorded. We had one of the first VHS recorders, so I recorded all the Marx Brothers movies as a kid on late night TV. And I watched them so many times that to this day, like, I have completely vivid memories of every late night Houston, Texas commercial from 1984 because and it's like Mattress Warehouse will save you money. It's like that played that was in every commercial break, and I dreamed that commercial because of how many times I watched these VHS tapes. So yeah, that's sort of that's the background, and then I as I wrote the books, I got into this idea of lost histories, which led me to start looking really intensely about 7-8 years ago for a great Marx Brothers lost history that maybe I could, have be one of my books. It was sort of a dream project. So yeah,
it's so fascinating. I was looking at your book again today. It's fascinating the way your kind of journey towards this parallels Noah's. You were both in your different field. You in the kind of the art field, and Noah in the theatre field. Were doing exactly the same thing, looking for a lost project, finding it in bits, piecing it together. It really runs in tandem.
Yeah, no, totally. And I found I started like keeping an eye on Noah there, like at the very beginning of my project, because I saw he was working to get the musical done, and I was so curious, and I reached out pretty early on, I think, and because for no other reason that I felt like I really needed to know this guy, just I need, this was a like-minded spirit, and I really started caring about what he was doing with his project, and I really wanted it to work, and Noah actually was a big help from the start, not to obviously mention what's become a really important contribution in the whole overall project with the lyrics collaboration in the book. But, he directed me to, a person that could actually sort of help me navigate getting the permissions I needed to actually make this a reality. And so yeah, and then just talking to him was just so great. When you get older, like I feel like a lot of people stop reaching out for and because we're grown-ups now, and like we're not going to try and make new friends, because we've got our friends and we've got our community, and that part's, I think that part becomes over for a lot of people, but I feel like in the arts that's not as true. I feel like in the arts there's really a need for that connection and a need to find new people to inspire you and to work with. And so I think there's more motivation for outreach. And so it's just really cool that 35 years on into the love of Marx Brothers and into the journey as an artist, two like-minded people like me and Noah can come together and become friends and play,
It is true. It turns out that it's a world full of wag halters.
That's right. It's true.
Well, let me ask you this, Josh. How far into your project did you determine what the format was going to be for your finished thing? A script, a book,
Well, because my third book was an illustrated novel, and I really loved I really loved that process of collaborating, with someone that was that could make images out of my ideas. I just it's so it's such a cool thing, I've always, my books are ways of me making movies without making movies. I feel like if you could create a book a certain way and you kind of get to make a movie without having to count on other people to get your movie made. That's the problem with movies, is that, you usually need other people. And to basically say yes or whatever. And so with the third book, I was really which was called The Good Inn, that I wrote with Black Francis from the band The Pixies. I was really trying to push that idea of, can I write a screenplay and give people the feeling that they're experiencing a movie that was never made. And so with that was sort of like, when I finished that, I was like, I love this. This is a great format. I think this is a really cool concept. I want to explore this more. And so I knew going in that I wanted to explore that idea more of like, and I didn't know if it was going to be, an illustrated novel or a graphic novel, but I was leaning towards the idea that would be more graphic novel this time, more storyboard, like a sort of. So that's what it turned into. And the first, it's sort of like two parts. The first part is biographical, and it's more like illustrated novel format. And then when you get into the movie, and you walk into the virtual movie theater, it becomes sort of a full-on graphic novel. And I knew early on that was my pitch anyway to the publisher of how I would do it. And I also thought that would be the most intriguing to the estates, because it was something very different, like I wanted, when I made my pitch to the Dali estate and to the Marx estate, I wanted to show that like I was going to do something, that other people hadn't necessarily thought of, and also I had proof that I could pull it off, from my previous books. So that was sort of how it all happened. Now, I never dreamed how far we'd get in bringing this concept of being able to read a movie to life. Because originally it was like, hey, Noah, you want to help me write some lyrics. And then we always had in the back of our head the idea that we'd actually record the soundtrack. But it was not until like 3 months ago that we realized we were actually going to be able to like legitimately record a full soundtrack to an unmade movie. And so that final nail is just sort of like, yeah, it's a movie you can read. So yeah, we're pretty excited.
I'd love to say a few words, Josh, about your other collaborators too.
Yeah. Please.
One of the things I love the most about the book, which again will be available in March for all of you, and you can pre-order it now, is it's such a beautiful physical object, and I don't want to discourage people who might want to buy the Kindle edition. I'm sure it'll be delightful on your device as well. But I think it's a very strong argument for the book in print, the book as a physical object, partly because the art direction throughout the book is just so dazzling. There's not a page of it that doesn't reward a very long time staring at it and studying it. There's so much in it. And that's largely because of the contributions of Manuela Pertega, who is the artist you found.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. You deliberately wanted a Spanish artist.
Yeah.
Who would be in some sense a continuation of Dali's national legacy. Tell us how you found her and how you worked with her.
This book almost didn't happen about 274 times. One of the times was because I lost my original illustrator, and there was like a number of months where it was just on hold and I didn't know what to do. So I went onto the internet and I Google searched for like any sort of like whatever the biggest online portfolio host for artists was. And I found this website, which for anyone looking for collaborators in the visual arts, this is like a gold mine. I'm surprised more people don't know or talk about it. The best part is probably because it's pretty impossible to pronounce right, which I'm going to completely fail at right now. Okay. Drum roll, please. Drum roll, please. The website is Behance or Behance or Bents. I have no idea. You can look it up, but it's an amazing place because artists from all over the world put their portfolios up with contact information. for collaborating and jobs. And the best part is you can search down to the city, state, country, zip code of where you're looking for someone. So I looked up where Dali was born, and I looked up the town and I typed it in. And what do you know? Within 150 miles of the town he was born and the town he lived in, there were 50 graphic artists. And I looked through everyone, and Manuela, she was on there, and she was listed as Barcelona, which was an hour and a half or so from where Dali grew up. And I figured, well, that's close enough for me. And I reached out to her, and I gave her the pitch, and she said that she was in. So it's pretty amazing, And I mean, her and Noah, I mean, you're so right. I can't stress enough that, this book was my baby for 6 years, but this book would not be this book without the, artistic team that put the final product together, which includes Noah. It includes my complete co-author, Manuela, Tim Heidecker, and then Quirk Books. They're really responsible for a lot of the the layout work. So it's totally a group effort.
There's also a sort of a collaborator on the project whose work isn't actually in the book, but can we talk about this, Josh? Some of the music that's been,
yeah.
I mean, since the book came out, there's been a lot of work done on the songs, and Quinn Arbeitman.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce Quinn's last name?
Behance.
Quinn Behance. Yeah, I mean, the music, which I know will find its way to the public ears before long, is a whole other aspect of this project. That's wonderful. You really rounded up a great stable of collaborators, and I'm happy to be one of them.
Yeah, Quinn lives in Japan, and I knew him from 20 years ago, and when he lived in Austin, Texas. And again, Marx Brothers fan, found him. We were going to do a Marx Brothers play like 20 years ago. It never ended up coming to fruition. It was an idea, and we had worked on a couple of small theater productions that I put on back in the late 90s in Austin. And over the years, I kept following him on Facebook, and I never had anything to talk about with him really for the last 20 years, but I kept him a friend because his posts were just fantastic, because they were like him playing like Cole Porter jazz with like these giant Japanese bands. And I just was fascinated with his, with his turn. And when I saw the finished lyrics, that Noah had worked through, I was like, we gotta put these to music. And then it hit me that Quinn, was a composer of jazz. And I wrote to him and I said, what do you know about Cole Porter? And the reason Cole Porter is so important is because Salvador Dali dreamed that Cole Porter would write the soundtrack to Giraffes on Horseback Salad. And he said, I know a lot. And next thing you know, me and Quinn and Noah are Facebook texting each other how to make this happen. So yeah, no, Quinn's like incredible. So yeah, he's gone far beyond the call. Like, he's taking this incredibly seriously. He like booked like one of the top recording studios in Japan, and he's got like a full orchestra. And I mean,
it's impressive.
It's really incredibly impressive. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's really cool. And I mean, I have to take Noah's sort of lead a little bit when I basically just sort of let Noah and Quinn kind of go to town, because I really trust Noah's sort of watermark, for the on the authenticity scale, and so I just I want to find a way to publish some of Quinn and Noah's back and forths on the text because it's really kind of amazing. Like it's like they're speaking this other language about these songs, and it's very cool. Very cool.
It's the ancient dialogue of Cole Porter.
Yeah, exactly. And Marx Brothers fusion. So yeah, no, it's neat. These guys are really doing amazing stuff, and I'm just really proud that I had like a vessel that all of these awesome artists could put in their talent to.
Do you have any thoughts about where this book and script may lead? Do you envision it possibly maybe being an actual film down the line, an animated film, a live action film? What would be your dream end game here?
Well, I'd like to answer that question from the perspective of my wife. Mm-hmm. Okay, which is, God, I hope this gets turned into a movie someday so that my husband will make $1 to invest in our children's college education someday. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm perfectly happy. If this is it, that's fantastic. Like I could not have dreamed of ever getting this far with it. But do I dream that it'll be a movie someday or an animated film or something else or a live show? Oh, I would love that. And I honestly think it deserves it. And I think it would be incredible. And that's why I do these books that I've done and the way I write them in the way that I do, because I'm trying to show that these could have or should have or should be more, have. So yeah, I mean, that'd be awesome, both career-wise, but also I honestly think that, if the project proves anything, it's that there was a movie in this but you know what? I'm sure we can get into this, down the line, but it's like, I don't think it should have, and I know it couldn't have been a movie then, like it probably shouldn't have then. But sometimes time and circumstance and understanding of the artist that wrote something that wasn't ready creates a situation where it's time for it to become something, like I don't think even Dali knew what he was trying to say back then. You know what I mean? Like I don't think he knew or cared how important what he was actually trying to do was. But when you're an artist decades later and you're looking back at the artist that was trying to create something's life, and you could kind of you could connect some dots that make the importance of the story they were trying to tell even more timely, and I feel like that's what happened with this. Does that make sense?
I'm imagining Thalberg putting Sam Wood in charge of directing.
One of the things that most interested me, or the biggest revelation for me in looking at your book, was that I certainly had always thought it was just a few random ideas, a couple of drawings jotted down with no real intention for it to actually turn into anything, just a little flight of fancy. But in actual fact, it wasn't it? It was a serious treatment that was written up at length, that was actually presented, unbelievable as that may seem.
Yeah, and contrary to what maybe a lot of people know or think, Dali actually really did want to make this movie. I mean, was he being Dali-ish with how he was doing it? Yes. It was kind of unclear how serious he was, I guess, in a way, but it's pretty clear that he had this vision of breaking into Hollywood and destroying it with surrealism, breaking it down. And from what I have researched and what I've taken from it, I think he was genuinely hurt and broken by this first, grand attempt at taking on Hollywood and making a movie with his one of his heroes, which was Harpo.
Show it to Louis B. Mayer. What could go wrong?
Everything, yeah.
It's a shoo-in.
The time and the place just wasn't right. Late 30s MGM.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, the idea that the Marx Brothers have appealed to and inspired artists who were not necessarily in the same discipline that they were is an idea that goes back as far as the popularity of the Marx Brothers in vaudeville, and especially into their Broadway period. And in order to talk about how the surrealists felt about the Marx Brothers and how appropriate or inappropriate it is to describe the Marx Brothers as surrealist artists, it might be informative to look back at the beginning a little bit, because the surrealists and the theater of the absurd and the Dada movement, that's one camp that loved the Marx Brothers, but they were pretty beloved across the high art spectrum. And as soon as I'll Say She Is made it to Broadway, a big fact of the Marx Brothers' lives was being surrounded by people who were perceived as being much higher up the cultural ladder than they were, but who just couldn't get enough of them. All the writers and intellectuals who clustered around the stage door at the casino waiting to make their introductions. What is it about the Marx Brothers that has made them, I think, more than other comedians, more than certainly any of their peers, appeal to the intellectual set, and their work seems to lend itself to interpretation to a degree that's unusual for popular comedians. What do we make of this? Is it because the Marx Brothers are themselves intellectual heavy hitters?
I think it's the iconoclasm more than anything else. I mean, if you look at, all of the silent comedians before they came along, they also did have a following. There was always a strong contingent among people and intellectuals to say, I'm totally in tune with this. And if you look at the things that they like, it's usually the countercultural things. It's usually kicking the cop in the ass. It's the spirit of kind of anarchy. And when the Marx Brothers came along, I think they were the one comedy team that focused on that isolated that element and took it to a new level. And so I think it was the perception of them as iconoclastic more than anything else that they did, that made them useful as almost as kind of mascots. If you look at, for instance, the Algonquin set, and Kaufman, etc., the people that not only took them on as friends or said they liked them, but actually started working with them. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at them that the relationship goes both ways, that they're both getting authenticity out of the relationship. And I think that's what it is. It's the idea of them as forces of nature.
Yes. I was thinking of Groucho's relationship with T.S. Eliot and how in the letters between the two of them, you can clearly see how much each of those two men is enjoying the admiration of the other. Yes, you're right. It was mutually flattering.
Yes.
In his book on the theater of the absurd, Martin Esselin talks about the silent comedians as having been a big influence on the theater of the absurd movement. And Ionesco, he says silent comedy has the dreamlike strangeness of a world seen from outside with the uncomprehending eyes of one cut off from reality. And that the coming of sound in the cinema killed the tempo and fantasy of that heroic age of comedy, but it opened the way for other aspects of the old vaudeville tradition. Laurel and Hardy, W.C. Fields, and the Marx Brothers exercised their influence on the theater of the absurd. And in Ionesco's The Chairs, the old man impersonates the month of February by, quote, scratching his head like Stan Laurel. And Ionesco himself told the audience at the American premiere of The Shepherd's Chameleon that the French surrealists had nourished him, but that the three biggest influences on his work had been Groucho, Chico, and Harpo Marx. What's wrong? Ionesco didn't like Zeppo?
I mean, the other thing, of course, to bear in mind with surrealists is that we've the kind of the what's come down to us now of the surrealist movement in kind of, the pop culture store of memory bank is a kind of a rather a tame. It's basically weirdness, isn't it? It's basically juxtapositions and dream logic, lobsters and clocks and so on. But this was an actual serious artistic movement, and it was genuinely revolutionary. I mean, they didn't want to be cute. They really did want to do some damage, didn't they?
Absolutely true. Yes, and they were very serious about themselves. You're right that surreal, like we throw the word surreal around now as though it just means, as you say, weird. Pineapples on pizza. That's so surreal. But and it's used to describe some of the stranger passages in Marx Brothers movies. It's also used interchangeably with the term Dada, which is not quite the same thing. The Dadaists were anti-art. They didn't take themselves seriously as artists, whereas Dali and Magritte were, very skilled painters, very great technicians. They just put their technique in the service of surrealistic ideas because that's what was interesting to them. Whereas the Dadaists like Marcel Duchamp exhibiting a urinal at an art gallery and calling it sculpture, or drawing a mustache on the Mona Lisa, that kind of thing. It was sort of an attack on the whole idea of art. So the Marx Brothers as characters are more Dada because they're self-conscious and they rebel against pretentiousness and propriety. Yes. But as artists, they're much closer to the surrealists. They're excellent in their craftsmanship, and they're sort of doing what they do without an agenda. Dadaism is a response to the horrors of World War I. Life is absurd and cruel anyway. So let's burn the whole thing down. The Marx Brothers, they don't really challenge our definition of comedy. They kind of exemplify our definition of comedy. Whereas the Dadaists were looking to break down the whole idea of what we think of as art.
Salvador had a very rocky relationship with his peers, because, well, for many reasons, some political, but also Dali took himself very seriously and he took his art very seriously. And, so there was he was thrown out of his own movement, Yeah. So, I find that really interesting, in relation to what you were just saying, about the difference actually between, the Dada and Dali, really. And I wanted to go back actually to one other point that was made 5 minutes ago, which was just dead on about, the round table and the literary elite were so drawn to the Marx Brothers. And when I was working on my second book about Peter Ivers and In Heaven Everything is Fine, it was about this guy Peter who really was a surrealist. I mean, he was an absurdist. He was very much a rebel artist, and he was very much involved in the subculture of the time in the 80s. And he had all these famous friends, and there's a real parallel between Peter and his friends and peers and the Marx Brothers and theirs, in that people were drawn to Peter that were in the sort of professional comedy world, that were in the professional creative world. They were nothing like him, in that he was just, Peter was fearless. He was punk rock. He was, surreal. And meanwhile, people like Harold Ramis and David Lynch, they were becoming famous, and they had offices and they had assistants and they were making quote unquote deals, but what would they do on their time off? they would go to this little punk rock recording studio where they were shooting this like crazy TV show about, that was completely surreal and absurd. And they would hang out there with those guys, and it was because they wanted to be around and to be inspired by the essence of this unbridled creativity. And, inside we're very much like the Marx Brothers or like Peter Ivers. But on the outside, they were living these grown-up, real world lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's self-validation too, isn't it? I mean, you can imagine the Marx Brothers thinking, oh my God, Alexander Woolcott and George Kaufman like us. They like us. But at the same time, Woolcott and Kaufman are thinking, isn't it great? These utterly authentic, sort of almost street artists are responding to our overtures. And probably neither one quite got it that it was totally mutual.
Yeah, totally.
And yet it must be said that although there are lots of affinities between the Surrealists and their brethren and the Marx Brothers, there are also many important differences. And in the commentary that members of the Surrealist movement made about the Marx Brothers, there sometimes seems to be a giant disconnect between what these guys seem to have seen in the films and what really is there. And that's worth talking about. It must be said too that surrealism, because it was a social movement as well as an art movement, there's a tremendous amount of surviving theory and dialogue about it, which holds up, I think, much less well than the work itself. The paintings of Dali are still wonderful to look at, and you can really enjoy and learn from his art. But the surrealist movement, the thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of social and artistic theory that they cranked out, sometimes sits strangely on modern ears. And I thought we might talk a little bit about some of the differences and discrepancies. In an essay called Who's Your Dada? The Marx Brothers at Paramount, Renata Jackson quotes the film historian Gerald Wheels. This is what he says. Some admirers of the Marx Brothers invoke words like surrealism and Dadaism to describe their work, a usage that is as misleading in fact as it is complimentary in intention. The French movements seem too programmatic to describe the Marx Brothers and their movies. The Marx Brothers movies had more to do with popular taste and prejudices than with intellectual theories about the restrictive nature of society, psychology, and language.
Bollocks.
Well, it certainly is true that the intention behind the Marx Brothers movies did not have to do with the, breaking down the restrictive nature of society, psychology, and language. That may well have been their effect. But do you sometimes feel, this is a question for the room, rubbed the wrong way by hearing the Marx Brothers discussed this way, or at least feel that there's something that doesn't ring true?
Well, I think you've pinpointed the distinction, isn't it, between intent and effect. I mean, there's no question as to the effect. I just think that if you go too far in ascribing motives, it's fun up to a point. I mean, obviously, they knew what was different about them compared to other more mainstream things. They got Harpo in particular. In Harpo Speaks, he's quite articulate, isn't he, about why he says this is why we're popular, because we do certain things that other people just think about or speculate on. So they knew what they had. But, the idea that they had an actual agenda, I think, in a funny sort of a way, kind of detracts from them. Whereas, the people who pursue that line think they're adding or revealing.
It's like an extension, the ultimate extension of the reinterpretation of Duck Soup as anti-war satire in the 60s. Yeah. It's taken that to an extreme and, defining their whole career by it.
Yes, I mean, if you say, if somebody were to say, Duck Soup is the most brilliant film to use as an anti-war argument, as a demonstration of the folly of war, etc., then I'm completely on board. I mean, obviously that it is. It's just when you just take that tiny extra step and say this is what they were actually doing, that I have to pull back and say they weren't actually.
I mean, do intentions really matter because in art? Because like, if I was meaning to do something else and then it was taken a different way and it became important that way, am I going to be angry that, like maybe me personally as an artist, I would be, but what that art becomes, isn't that sort of what's important?
Yeah, I think so. And it also seems that in the context of the time that the Marx Brothers were emerging, even aside from their intentions, during that period between the wars, when the Marx Brothers did their great work, there was something in the zeitgeist. I mean, this is the time when Dadaism and surrealism have their moments as art movements. And the 1920s is known as the era of wonderful nonsense. And you saw it in light verse. You saw it in newspaper humor. There was a tremendous appetite for silliness. And for breaking away from the kind of conservative structure of what literature had been. I don't think the Marx Brothers saw themselves as part of an art movement. But you're right, Josh, whether or not they did, clearly the soup that everyone was swimming in at the time had a lot to do with, surprising juxtapositions of ideas and humor that didn't necessarily rely on the nose buttons.
It makes me think of alternative rock. Okay, just stick with me here. Like,
that's where the Pilgrims live,
right? That's
alternative rock.
No, I mean, the Pixies, Nirvana, they didn't think that what they were doing was going to lead to this movement that was going to create magazines like Spin magazine, in which these rock journalists were going to be debating the importance of this album or this song or how to change the world or whatever. It's they were just making music, I promise they did not intend for flannel shirts to become the symbol of a movement, it's just I never really thought much about or really cared about the Marx Brothers, what their intentions were, they were just freaking funny and amazing and brilliant, and it hit me, in this place. And now if I met them, maybe it's meeting, never meet your heroes, maybe that would, destroy everything, but I, never had the chance. So in my mind, there's a purity there, and I never sort of questioned that. I don't know.
This is Antonin Artaud, a theorist and critic and thinker, and one of the guys who's always quoted in discussions about the Marx Brothers' appeal to the intellectual and artistic elite. Antonin Artaud went to see Monkey Business, and this is what he had to say about it. In Monkey Business, we again have the Marx Brothers, all with their own individual characters, brimming with confidence and manifestly ready to do battle with the rest of the world. Except that whereas in Animal Crackers, each character seems to degenerate progressively, we see from the start their clowning antics and cavortings, and it is only toward the end that things get more serious, with objects, animals, noises, the master and his servants, the host and his guests, all becoming more and more frenzied, frantic, and rebellious, and accompanied by a rapturous and sometimes lucid commentary from one of the brothers, carried away by the mood that is generated as the film progresses. This is a commentary that seems to be both astounded and transitory. Nothing is as hallucinating and at the same time as terrible as this kind of manhunt, as this battle between the rivals, as this pursuit into a cowshed or a barn festooned with spider webs, while men, women, and beasts all act out their parts and find themselves surrounded by a pile of miscellaneous objects whose respective movements or noises will all turn out to be relevant. did this guy even see Monkey Business?
I'll have what he's having.
Yeah. I can't help but wonder, is this kind of thinking a more natural result than we might think of seeing Monkey Business translated into French?
Maybe it's not the version of Monkey. Maybe it's not the Marx Brothers version of Monkey Business.
You think it's the 50s version of Monkey Business?
I think you might be
Now
onto
it makes
something.
sense.
I actually think you might be onto something with the French thing there, because truthfully, because like I always wonder if when I'm watching a French film, if it's actually not as like poetic and amazing as it looks to me when I'm like watching it, in French with subtitles. Like if I was actually French and watching it in French, would it actually be boring?
Yeah. The problems of like translating especially Groucho Chico dialogue into another language. I mean, puns are always a challenge for translators, the same way rhyme is a real challenge for translators. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if like maybe the Marx Brothers dialogue seemed a further degree removed from reality in translation.
Yeah, we need to get Vigo Sivanto in on this because he's sort of the expert on this. But yes, you're absolutely right. When you have things like puns, obviously that unless you're incredibly lucky and by sheer coincidence you can find a word in the other language, the two words in the other language work the same way, which is a million to one. Basically, what the translator has to do is write their own jokes, which is, not in the job description, is it? If you're somebody whose job, if you spend every day of your life translating films into your language, suddenly you're presented with this film that is full of puns, and you have to invent effectively new jokes that are supposedly as good, but could be worse or could be better.
Yeah, like dollars, taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all these, innuendo in your window. No, I'm sure there's no language other than English where innuendo, the word that means innuendo, sounds like, coming through the fenetra. So suddenly, you're a comedy writer, and you're just here to translate. And I do think, as Josh said, that inevitably films that are not in your own language have a mystique. They have a sheen. And it's different with American movies, I guess, because American movies, the whole world sort of sees all of them. But certainly with other countries, the films you see have already been pre-selected. If France or the run-of-the-mill French film, unfortunately, we never get to see. We only get to see the ones that are felt to have, crossover appeal. So I get the feeling that with the Marx Brothers, because they were different, which they clearly were, because they were doing something that the other comedians weren't doing, in a funny sort of a way, the opposite to what we might think would be true is true, which is that it does gain in translation. It does seem even more different.
What might be an interesting experiment is to take one of these translations and translate it back into English.
Like Mark Twain with the jumping frog.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is this room team Monkey Business or not?
As far as Monkey Business being a masterpiece?
Yeah, because for me it always holds a very, very dear place, because I'm pretty sure it was the first one that I saw, and definitely one of the ones I watched the most as a kid.
Yeah,
I think I may hold it a little lower than most, just because I miss Groucho in that authoritative role, and I think he's a bit diminished there, even though the material itself is still fantastic.
I think very highly of Monkey Business. I put it, not quite at, but close to the top. And episode 7 of the Marx Brothers Council podcast, Too Late, That's Monkey Business Already, has a discussion at length of how it, its place in the canon, and how it differs from some of their other masterpieces, but I do think it's one of their masterpieces.
Yeah.
And it is also, I think, because this is the period when the Marx Brothers go to Hollywood, and when talkies themselves are being made proficiently enough to become the dominant kind of film. This is when the Marx Brothers start to get that kind of attention. I think it's during the Monkey Business and Horse Feathers period. That's when all of this commentary starts pouring in from France, and artists across the ocean start taking notice.
And other than room service, it might be, you can make a case that it's the most experimental and ambitious thing they ever did, trying to deviate from what we consider the normal Marx formula.
Yes, absolutely. And also because it's the first time they're not making a film based on a stage piece, they were in some sense freer to go surreal, and to use the language of film, it's as a vehicle for their humor. That certainly kicks in Monkey Business and continues through the next two Paramounts. Some of Salvador Dali's the experiments in film that did get made give us an interesting sense, not just of what Giraffes on Horseback Salad might have been like, but of how this surrealist vision would have incorporated itself into the medium of popular film. Un Chien Andalou is the short film that Dali made with Louis Buñuel, which, is a short, surrealist, silent film full of bizarre imagery. But some of the techniques are recognizable from comedy. The image of a human hand with ants crawling out of a hole in it, looking very much like the ants on the pocket watch in Dali's Persistence of Memory. That's the same kind of technique that they would use to make a live dog come out of the tattooed doghouse on Harpo's chest in Duck Soup. And the dream sequence that Dali worked on for Hitchcock in Spellbound, which looks very much like a Dali painting come to life, reminds me quite a bit of the Manuela Ortega illustrations in your book, Josh.
One thing that I did a lot of reading on when I was doing my research on Dali and film was, he did a lot of recycling, like, and not in a bad way, like not in like a lazy way. Like that was sort of, I think, part of what he did, like he would take ideas from other pieces and either expand on them or rework them or rethink them. And you notice that a lot with what happened with Giraffes on Horseback Salad, in that, he did these beautiful sketches, that were his version of, sort of shotless, then after, when it wasn't made, he took a lot of that imagery and used it in the future for other things. He had his obsessions, like any artist. And they say, a filmmaker only makes one movie their entire life, like, they make the same movie, just in different ways, trying to get it right, And
this isn't the Woody Allen podcast.
Right. Well, no, I mean,
I think it was George A. Romero, wasn't it?
No, exactly. Well, Woody Allen is obviously a prime example of that, but Spielberg, like is a more family friendly one. What
do you mean by that crap?
But yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, and that was what Dali was doing, not just with his imagery from Giraffes, but from his silent movie, surrealist movies, onward. And, yes, as Noah said, he would go on to do, some other, the Hitchcock piece. And then there was the unfinished, Destino, which was a collaboration with Disney, which, they actually in recent years went back and finished. It was a short. And, and one of the things I think so great about what Manuela did is she took that idea and used it in the imagery and storytelling of our book, by recycling, and rethinking, just as Dali did, some of these iconic imagery ideas. And it's one of the stories that I discovered in my research is that Dali actually had the idea for the surrealist woman as a story or as a character before writing Giraffes on Horseback Salad. And before making it a Marx Brothers movie, he had this sort of story idea. And then he was inspired by his time with Harpo to finish it and to basically use it as a Marx Brothers vehicle.
Manuela's illustrations, as well as your text, Josh, do such a nice job of continuing that idea of Dali's. You know, as you point out so rightly, Dali, like many artists, kept reincorporating familiar images into his paintings. Yeah. And a lot of those icons from the Dali-verse pop up in the book. You see the meditative rose from Dali's painting floating at one point. Motifs like elephants on stilts. The whole idea of flaming giraffes, you know, that pops up more than once in Dali. And it's a major theme, of course, in the book. And so it's so nice the way it draws on these canons and continues what all of these artists were doing.
My whole take, like, on Giraffes on Horseback Salad and sort of the framework I used for completing it was that Giraffes on Horseback Salad is actually about him. He's actually the protagonist. He melded himself with Harpo as the character of Jimmy, and he lives through Harpo in this story. He is the Spanish businessman that comes to America to escape war. I mean, it's just very clear what was going on, whether it was subconscious or not. Like the few notes that he wrote about who Jimmy, the lead character, was, it's like, oh, this is him. And then the idea that Harpo would play Jimmy, which is him, to me, and you know, that was like, you know, that's how the whole idea of making this story concrete came about. It's like, let's look at Salvador Dali as an artist, and let's look at what appealed to him about the Marx Brothers, and that's going to fill in the narrative aspects that are missing. And again, this was my take on it. My interpretation was, if someone like Thalberg or a studio head was to actually make this, they would think about these things. They would think, how are we going to make this, you know, edible for the audience? And so I feel like whoever was going to wrangle Dali's vision would have looked at it in this way, you know, like would have looked at it in who actually is this protagonist and what is their hero's journey here and why. And it all, to me, goes back to Dali. And so Manuela's take on bringing his iconic imagery and sort of carrying it over, it made so much sense to do that, because this is really the story of a surrealist who's lost, who's a refugee, and in a mad world. And what's the obvious thing that's going to happen? He's going to become Harpo Marx.
It's always seemed to me that one of the differences between surrealism and comedy is that comedy is trying to be funny and often succeeds. And in my earlier investigations of the Marx Brothers, one thought I used to have a lot about the sort of interest that Salvador Dali took in them was that surrealism is, in some ways, it's like comedy without the laughs. You know, it involves absurd or bizarre juxtapositions of things, but it's not really trying to make you laugh, which in some ways seems easier to students of comedic art. Like, oh, well, if you remove the imperative to make people laugh and all you have to do is be weird, what a relief.
So you're saying Go West is surrealistic?
I'm saying it's bizarre, yes.
So you're saying Eddie Izzard is a surrealist?
I mean, I have a more charitable view of all of this than I did then, when it was the most important thing to me was to demonstrate that the Marx Brothers were superior to everything else in the world. And now I feel like, it's all worthwhile and it's all part of the soup. But when looking over what Dali left behind in terms of his notes and his sketches, I think many of us have had the same response that Joe Adamson documents so beautifully in his book, which is, this is all very interesting, but it does not seem like it would have added up to anything we would recognize as a Marx Brothers movie. I now feel like, yeah, that's true, but that's also fine. Dali wanted to use the Marx Brothers as icons, and have them running through the landscape of his imagination. And
yes,
that's a perfectly legitimate way to use them, just as making room service was a perfectly legitimate idea that wasn't quite what we think of as a Marx Brothers movie.
So in a way, it's almost better, I think, that it has waited its time until now, because it would be almost a misuse of the real them. It's much better now that they're gone, for somebody like Josh to come along and do this thing. And yeah, wouldn't it be great if it was made into an animated movie, using them as icons to do something different?
Yeah, and it also must be said that Josh and his collaborator Tim Heidecker have done something with Giraffes on Horseback Salad that Dali was just not equipped to do, which is write a lot of jokes.
Make it funny, yeah.
And so the book is funny, and it does contain recognizable Marx Brothers humor that's not really to be found in Dali's notes.
All I have to say to that is thank you, Noah.
You're welcome. You did. There's no denying it. There are jokes in this book, and
thank God.
One of the pleasures of it is the humor. There are times when you've I don't want to give away any punchlines, but you have in many places taken the format of a recognizable Marx Brothers bit and just tweaked it just enough to use it, just cast it in a new light, so that I think even if you picked up this book with no background about surrealism and not knowing much about Dali, you would be hypnotized by the dazzling visuals, but you would also, there are many pockets in it of, what we might call vintage Marx Brothers stuff.
I have nothing to add to that. That was perfect.
I was just transfixed by the phrase vintage Marx Brothers stuff. Momentarily dazzled. I'm back now.
Josh has nothing to say about this other than the 220 pages he's published.
Well, you do mention that sometimes Dali just left holes where it said Marx Brothers antics. So.
Right. Marx Brothers antics ensue.
Well, boy, is that a phrase that haunts my dreams. That is one of the similarities, as you're pointing out at the top of the show, between, in one sense, you couldn't have two more different worlds than the world of I'll Say She Is and, the Broadway comedy reviews of the 1920s and the world of the surrealists and their agendas and their style. On the other hand, people who worked with the brothers or wanted to work with the brothers left behind lots of pages that say "Insert the Marx Brothers."
Right.
And in some way, you and I, Josh, have both taken it upon ourselves to try to insert the Marx Brothers here.
That could be on our gravestones.
It probably will be. Actually, that's on their gravestones. Is Dali, how far back, Josh, does your interest in Dali go? I can't help but notice the Pixies are a big part of your life, and you've written about them and worked with Black Francis. And isn't there a Dali reference in a Pixies lyric?
Yes. And actually, no, it's true. Like when I got into the Pixies in high school and got their album that had the first song, Debaser, on it. The album was Doolittle. you're 16 years old and you're like, what does that mean? And so, you like discuss it with your friends, and, you can't Google it at the time, but, how did we find out that it was probably an article, in some alternative rock magazine, like had him mention that, it was a song about, Salvador Dali's surrealist movie. And then you're like, oh, I got to see that movie. And, I don't know the first time I saw, it might have been in film school, because, it was really hard to see, weird surrealist movies back before the internet, unless you went to the art house cinemas and stuff. But in college, we watched a lot of surrealist movies, and of course they spoke to me. I mean, I was a weird kid, like I was in I had a rock band that was like half Pixies, half Genesis, half King Crimson. We were weird, man. We were very.
That's three halves.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
You're
of
right.
halves.
That is a lot of halves. Yeah. We were.
That's so.
We
surreal.
were so surreal, man. But so I was like writing really surreal stuff when I was like 14, 15, and again, I'm sure it had to do with growing up on the Marx Brothers and all that, and so. So yeah, like I was really into absurdism, from a young age, and when I found out my heroes, the Pixies, were referencing Salvador Dali, it was like that even made Dali cooler,
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I got into surrealist cinema from, not just from France, but I always considered Werner Herzog to be surrealist. I was a big fan of his movies, and absurd. Have you guys seen the movie Strozek? Oh, it's Werner Herzog, one of his early movies. You should totally see it, because it's a great example of like absurd surrealist, dark though. Absurd surrealism. Of course, it's German. So yeah, Strozek is a great example of like another country's version of surrealism, I feel, and the lead character doesn't speak very often in it, and so in a way, he's sort of this dark version of a silent comedy actor. So yeah.
Incidentally, Josh, are you aware of our prior tying together of the Marxes and the Pixies?
No.
Right. Okay. I'll find it and I'll put it on the council again. A couple of years ago, I staged a Marx Brothers festival here in Bath, and I wanted a little introductory film to get everybody whipped up right at the start. So I went to Bob, who's a video editor supreme, and I said I want about 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes of really fast cutting, the very best moments of the Marx Brothers, and I want it set to "Here Comes Your Man."
Ah, that's awesome.
And the reason for that was, I don't know if have you seen the film Gianni e le Donne, Salt of Life?
No.
Gianni de Gregorio's Italian film. It's a gorgeous, brilliant, hilarious Italian film, but it ends with him accidentally taking drugs while he's out walking his dog, and he has these hallucinations and so on. And the final scene is set to "Here Comes Your Man," and I was in the cinema with it, and it just the whole audience kind of almost hovered above. It just had a brilliant effect, and I thought, God, I want to put the Marx Brothers to this song, and so that's what we did, and it's great. So I'll put it on the council, and you can see what you make of it. Yeah. Anyway, forget that. Back to the show.
Okay.
Well, the discussion of Werner Herzog and makes me think. I wonder what you guys make of Ionesco and his connection to the Marx Brothers. To me, it's a little complicated because, on one hand, I'm tempted to put Ionesco in the same box with the surrealists and say he's an important artist who admired the Marx Brothers, and you can see why he did. But what he was doing was really quite different. But on the other hand, although Ionesco's plays, he didn't write jokes. You would never confuse him with George Kaufman. Unlike the surrealists, he wrote for the theater, and his plays are funny. I mean, they're not exactly comedies. They don't contain jokes. It's mostly the kind of dissociative juxtaposition of language, kind of a parody of the whole idea of communicating with each other. And yet, put in the mouths of actors, and subjected to all the things you can't avoid in the theater, like timing and emphasis, Ionesco does play pretty funny. And seems like maybe it's halfway between what the Marx Brothers were doing. And, it's a middle ground between comedy and surrealism.
I feel that way about a number of absurdist playwrights, actually. To be honest, I'm not as familiar with Ionesco as I am, say, like Waiting for Godot and The Zoo Story. The Zoo Story. Sure. Oh man, The Zoo Story had a huge, profound effect on me when I was younger. And again, it's not Marx Brothers funny, but it's got that absurdity and that there's a connection there. It's the part of the Marx Brothers surrealism that doesn't have the jokes and gags, but has the other players in an absurd world without the ability to be funny.
Well, long ago when I was first exploring all of this, I read Ionesco on paper. I read The Bald Soprano, and I thought, you gotta be kidding me. This is like, whatever its merit, it's not in the same universe as the Marx Brothers. Then I saw it performed live in the theater, and it's a completely different experience with timing and rhythm and playing to the audience. And I thought, oh, okay, I can absolutely see why this makes people think of the Marx Brothers.
An awful lot of these playwrights, you get the feeling that they're kind of writing with old comedians in mind as their dream casting. I mean, Beckett, actually did sort of write with Buster Keaton in mind, didn't he? And there's this Buster Keaton project film, with Beckett, and Stan Laurel as well. Obviously, Laurel and Hardy should be in Waiting for Godot. I mean, they could easily do that, and I think, however different the thing ends up, I get the feeling that very often the initial reference point in terms of what they're seeing in their minds is our old comedians, because they're great actors, aren't they? I mean, comedians by definition,
absolutely,
are skillful, graceful actors.
In Watt, which was written by Beckett during World War II, this is a quotation. "I helped to lay out this darling place," said the old man. "In that case," said Arthur, "perhaps you can tell me the name of this extraordinary growth." "That's what we call a hardy laurel," said the old man. So they were very deliberate in trying to align themselves with these comedians.
Another strange pairing is that there was another lost project, actually. Famous Russian filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky had begun working on a movie project with Charlie Chaplin at one point that never came about.
I never knew that. When was that?
I was afraid you were going to ask me for anything other than that information.
Tell us all about it, please.
No, that's literally, like, I really, you can look it up. It's true. I can tell you, as a follow-up to that fact, that when Tarkovsky was asked what his 10 favorite films of all time were, one of them was a Chaplin film. Please don't ask me which one.
Well, when was he asked?
Please don't ask me what year he was at. Oh, 1972. 1972. and it was City Lights. It was City Lights. Yes. Suck it.
You're the fifth person to say that to me today.
Sight and Sound magazine over here does the 10 greatest films of all time every 10 years, and they petition a load of critics, and they also petition a load of directors. And the last 1992, which was the last time that within a 10-year span that Fellini was alive, he gave his 10 favorite films, which were very interesting in that 3 of them were his own films, and I think he was the only director to do that. But also the remainder were all old comedies. movies. City Lights was one of them, and the Marx Brothers were there as well. And he added a little commentary to his choices, and he said, just the other day, I woke up in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get a glass of water and flicked on the television, and Duck Soup was playing. I wanted to go back to bed, but I couldn't. I had to stay. And within minutes, tears of laughter were rolling down my cheeks.
Aw. You just picture Fellini crying and laughing watching the Marx Brothers. And he was one of the many elevated artists who wanted to work with the Marx Brothers. Didn't he want to cast Groucho in Satyricon?
He tried to cast him twice. Yes, he asked him to be in Juliet of the Spirits. And Groucho, I think mainly because of the travelling issue, said no, but he was quite flattered, I think. So then when Satyricon came along, yes, he tried a new tack of just saying he was going to be in it and hoping for the best.
Right.
Along with Mae West and I think a few others as well. He just said, yeah, we're going to have it. And again, unfortunately, it didn't happen. But that would have been something to see. I would have so much rather have seen that than Skidoo.
Yeah. Are you sure about that? I mean, well, whether you're Fellini or Tarkovsky or Salvador Dali or Josh Frank, it's one thing to envision a project like this with the personalities of great comedians melding with some other artistic sensibility. It's quite another thing to actually make it happen. And as with my experiences with I'll Say She Is, one of the great things about Giraffes on Horseback Salad is, it's now something you can hold in your hand, or at least in March when it's widely available. It'll be something you can hold in your hands. And, one of the most satisfying things in my experience has been that now, after all of this effort, if people research I'll Say She Is, Google it or something, there's, exponentially more there to learn than there was before. And that's true too. I mean, if you had Googled Salvador Dali and the Marx Brothers together, some months ago even, you would have gotten Dali's original notes and sketches and lots of people commenting on the fact that Dali wanted to work with them. Now there's a whole work of art to explore. And to actually realize anything is an achievement.
Similarly, if you look up Salvador Dali in the index of either of my two Marx Brothers books, you will find references to the project that are, what is the word? I suppose sniffy. They're, I'll be honest, they're fairly negative.
Right.
But I with my hand on my heart, I must say your book has turned me around. I mean, I'm not a fan of Dali and the Surrealists, but just the realization that this was a genuine project and that so much more thought went into it than I'd realized. That has genuinely been a revelation for me.
Yes, and on a serious note, I would really like to know how you plan on handling the blowback from the Zeppo contingent.
So yeah, right. Well, look, at first I was a little worried about that and stuff, but then I realized that it's not my fault.
Zeppo?
Yeah, no, that he's not in it.
I can't blame you for
that he's not in it. It was Dali's fault. It was Dali's fault.
It's also 1937. I mean, because we associate Dali, and so we think of it as being part of the Paramount period. And that's why Adamson very appropriately places his discussion of surrealism in his chapter on horse feathers. It somewhat obscures the fact that Dali and Harpo happened in 37. And if this movie had been made, you're correct, Josh, to place it in the MGM period, because that's when they were talking. So Zeppo was no longer part of the team.
Well, with that said, though, I will say there were 2 or 3 sort of Easter egg fan service things. When I say fan service, I mean myself included, that I really wanted to put in there. And due to timing, as far as I'd done sort of one final draft that I really wanted the publisher to use, but it was too late, to make. They were able to make 85% of the changes in this last draft, but there was 3 that involved like a couple of extra pages that they weren't able to do. And they have promised me that if the book gets a second edition, that they will add them. So it's really up to Marx Brothers fans to buy 30,000 copies of the book. And then they can buy the second edition with the additional pages. Half joking. But what those Easter egg ideas were, one included Zeppo. And the big one, which I was pretty crushed that it didn't get in, was I had a great call out and honoring of Margaret Dumont. I did. I was so pumped to put it in there. And it was like, because people were going to be like reading the whole book and be like, where's Margaret Dumont? Where's Margaret Dumont? Like, and then the payoff, it was like an end joke that paid off her not being in it. Now, again, Dali made no mention of her being in his movie. So again, not my fault, but I had the perfect way of putting her in, and I'm really hoping I get the opportunity to add it back in if someday I get a second edition. And those were the 2 big ones. I was going to have a Zeppo moment, and I was going to have my Margaret Dumont moment. So hopefully those will get to be back in there at some point.
Well, on the subject of Zeppo, I couldn't help noticing while looking into Dali for this podcast and for working on the lyrics for your book, Josh, that there's an image that occurs frequently in Dali's paintings. That's a kind of bizarre self-portrait that he would use. And it's a sort of face in profile with ridiculously long eyelashes. There's often a nose coming out of a nose. But it looks a little bit like Zeppo's profile. It's a nose and a forehead that are sort of continuous and very long. And that's, it's sort of Dali himself also had a slightly Zeppo-like profile, which I guess is why this surreal self-portrait that he kept using, it's not un-Zeppo-like.
Actually, you reminded me when you talk about there is a joke, isn't there? I was looking at the book again today. That is Dali's own, unless I misunderstood it, where he's dancing Groucho is dancing cheek to cheek with a woman, and is clearly finding it uncomfortable. So he takes a spoon and scoops part of her cheek away, and then rests his chin. Yeah. In the that it's not really a Marx Brothers joke, but he is obviously thinking in terms of jokes, isn't he? And that is funny.
No, it's true, and in the book, in one section of the biographical part, there's a list from his notebook of some of his gag ideas, and they're in the book as well. Like they were put into the story, but they're totally nuts and really bizarre. And if you're into like dark comedy, then absolutely he put some jokes in there. There was some serious subversive stuff, and that was definitely one of them. So he definitely did come up with his own version of Marx Brothers jokes, or tried to, for sure.
Well, I wanted to ask you the question, which I think is the one question that's on everybody's mind, which is, in the course of this project, you had to negotiate with the Marx estate and the Dali estate. Which was the biggest pain in the ass?
Well, it was,
Flounder.
Okay, tell us which was the least biggest pain in the ass.
I was very lucky. That's all I can say, is that I was very lucky to reach out to both at the time that I did and with the project that I did, because I feel like I don't think it's just because I'm charming. I feel like it's because I had a really special idea and I presented it in a way where both parties saw, that this wasn't about making a biography of the Marx Brothers. You know what I mean? Or this wasn't about taking something that Dali had already done and doing something bigger and different with it. This was a project that none of these parties had really thought about doing something with.
It was a hypothetical.
It was, yeah, and so
it's a hypothetical.
It was so clear that this was something that was so not of the same ilk of, what I think over the decades other people had wanted to do. Now, I will say that, and actually, once once I was able to make my pitch to the Marx estate, like they were incredibly helpful and incredibly supportive. Because I did a lot of homework beforehand. I had a good publisher. I had a great artistic team. And I think part of the reason that it was not incredibly difficult with the Marx estate was I already had the Dali Foundation on board, and the package was ready to go. Now, it's hard enough to get people on a telephone call or get an email response when you're in the same time zone and you speak the same language, but in order to get this project done, I literally had to, for about 3 months, I had to wake up at 2 a.m. and start calling the Dali Foundation every 20 minutes until 7 a.m. in hopes that they would answer and, I'd be able to move the project along. That was the only time I really thought that this might fall apart, is just trying to get everything sorted out with the foundation in Spain.
It's hard to communicate with them because their whole office, all the clocks are just dripping.
They're dripping all over their siesta, and their holidays are whack. Okay. Like they literally take off for the entire summer. So like, if on July 8th, you haven't taken care of your business, you're not getting anything done until August 31st, but it was great. I mean, it was very exciting, that both of these estates helped me get as far as I did. And I'm honestly just forever grateful. And it was a bit of luck, a bit of bootstrapping, and a lot of financial investment on my part, just in pulling it all together. Mainly with, the publisher fully supported the book, but I mean, it was really, it's up to the author to pull it all together. So, before I worked on this for 3.5 years before I had a publisher, I funded, the book until I had a publisher, and that was a lot. So it was not easy in any way, but once I had the right material to show to both estates, it really, and I got there okay. I mean, even after I got there okay, it was scary because, they only saw samples. So the whole time until the book was done, I was afraid that they would see the final product and be like, dude, this sucks. We're out. Like I just didn't know, and so the big moment for me was when I sent the book to the Dali estate. And because I knew the history of it taking months to get a response, I was like, this is going to be the worst 2 months of my life. They actually wrote back like a week later and were like, congratulations, we really like this. And same with Bill Marx, like I as soon as the cover was done, as soon as like the first 10 pages were drawn, I sent them to him, and he wrote back and he said, this is lovely. So
I wonder if we might say a few words about that. I mean, the book makes very clear, you're one of many Marx Brothers fans and artists who have experienced firsthand what a beautiful and warm and supportive guy Bill Marx is.
Oh my gosh.
He wrote a beautiful intro too. The book has, it's structured like a movie. And so before the main feature presentation, there are 3 shorts in a newsreel. And one of the shorts is a little piece that Bill wrote for you. which is quite something. It's really special.
I'd like to say something about Bill. Like, I was lucky enough to present in person to him the artwork for the first time in Rancho Mirage, and it was so wonderful.
You didn't wear the costume like you did the first time you met him.
No, I didn't. But I told him the story, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember you. You were weird, man. Like, what were you, 9? You were wearing a trench coat? Come on, no." But like, he's a hero to me. You know, I mean, like, he wasn't actually a Marx Brothers per se, but as a 9-year-old, seeing him in person, that was the closest thing I was ever going to get to meeting a Marx Brothers. And he played the piano, and there was a harp there. So to me, you know, like, from a young age, he was a Marx Brother to me, and he is the remaining child of a Marx Brother that carries on that spirit in public in some way. You know what I mean? Like, there's still a couple of others, but, like, you know, they're not, you know, actively, they haven't actively been in public in many years, like, greeting fans, and he had done that up until recently, and to me, he's so important in that way, and you know, as I've been prepping this book tour, I've been working to get at least one event in Rancho Mirage, because, you know, Bill doesn't really travel anymore, and the one way to kind of present with him would be to do it in Rancho Mirage, and I've actually been having trouble finding somewhere in Rancho Mirage, because there's actually, even though it is in the middle of nowhere, Palm Springs. You know, Palm Springs is kind of a hip place. I would actually think there'd be more spots, but there's actually not. And I've been really a little bit bummed because, like, I really want to celebrate Bill, you know, in this, because to me he's very important and very special, and I feel like if anyone is a fan of the Marx Brothers and a fan of their legacy, I feel like having a moment with Bill is a gift, you know, is a special thing. So I'm really trying to pull that off. I'm really trying to create at least one event in April where you know, anyone that could get to Palm Springs could have that, you know, but also, I guess, you know, to video it and be able to maybe live stream it. I don't know. I'm sure that to most people it's not as big a deal. I guess, like, maybe you know, he's just the son of Harpo, but to me, he's the son of Harpo. You know, I don't know. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
you know,
he's a living link to our brothers.
So yeah, so I can't express enough how special he is to me, and how important I think he is to the world, and as well, I feel like I really want to give you know, Robert Bader a lot of credit for you know, he's done a lot of work with Bill, and in helping with Harpo's legacy, and he cares so much about Bill, and it's been nice to share that feeling with Robert, and to see how much, to see in person how devoted he is. I always say, you create some art, and it's very possible no one's going to give a shit. You know, and like, I feel like as an artist, you always have to prepare yourself for that and just be prepared. But I hope that when people read the book, that if anything that they get out of it, I hope they read the story about Bill, honestly, you know, because I'd like for people to know how important he is to me and to other people.
Well, I would certainly second the instruction to anyone listening to go out and get a copy when it comes out in March. It is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful work of art in its own right. It's also an utterly valid and important contribution to Marx history. And not only that, but what is Manuela's phone number, by the way?
It's in Spanish. Do you speak Spanish?
Damn it!
You want to know what you want to know? What's funny is that, like, you know, we wrote this whole book. We've never met, you know, but she is going to come to the release events in New York City and in London.
I'm there.
Why don't we, as we enter the as we attempt to bring this episode in for a landing, Josh, this would be a good time for you to tell us a little bit about those events. Can you plug those?
Oh my God, I would love to. I have been working on them. My publisher, they're sort of like dizzy, I think now, and like they're all like taking.
They obviously
they're all taking like last minute vacations for some reason as I send them all these events that I put together, because they're like, it's really hard to get book events. I'm like, okay, and then
that's the way.
And then the next thing you know, I send them 14 events that I've set up.
Yeah. What kind of help are you going to give me with promotion? Oh, whatever you want to do, you just go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, they're doing their job, with the news and all that. But like, the artist is the best spokesperson for public stuff, I think, because I can make a lot of good shit up that I'm going to do and get these venues excited. I think we'll be able to pull some of it off. And I'm expecting your help, Noah, with some of it.
I'll be there. The New York event, anyway.
And for a future conversation, I'm actually hoping we could figure out a way to maybe have just the music on the songs that you're going to be singing, and maybe we could figure out a way to actually have you sing them live. I'd love that if that's possible.
Yes, there will. If things go as according to plan, there will be the parts of the book may come to life at the New York.
So I'm excited about that. So I've got a bunch of Austin, Texas events, obviously, because that's where I live. The Alamo Draft House, which is a really famous movie cinema in Austin, around the country, is going to be doing.
I remember the Alamo Draft House.
Yeah, there you go. Bum. We're going to be doing Duck Soup and a presentation in DC. I'll be at Politics and Prose in and all this is on the website for the book, horsebacksaladbook.com.
That's horsebacksaladbook.com.
That's right. And New York, really cool venue in the East Village called Caveat New York that Noah will be at. I'm hoping Noah will also join me at the Quad, where we're going to be showing a movie that same week of March 26th, 27th, 28th. And then
I'm going to try and make it to one of those.
That'd be great. Doylestown
great.
Bookstore in Pennsylvania, Houston, Texas, Brazos Books and 14 Pews Cinema, Austin Film Society Cinema back in Austin in April, and then a couple of dates in Los Angeles in April. One is at this really cool venue called Dynasty Typewriter, which is going to be really neat. And then again, that same week, I'm hoping for Palm Springs with Bill Marx in April. And then the Egyptian later in April, which is an amazing theater, a famous cinema. And then London at the Barbican, is it Barbican or Barbican?
Barbican.
Barbican! Barbican!
But I prefer Barbican.
It's going to be Barbican and not Barbicant. And so that's supposedly a really amazing...
And not Barbara Marx.
That's supposed to be a really amazing venue. I'm excited about that. And a lot of really cool stuff. And I hope lots of people come out. And, it's funny. It's like the book publisher's like, well, we don't really, usually get a lot of book sales or people coming to these events. And I'm like, yeah, but the people that come are going to be awesome. And I want to meet them, like this is like the best opportunity to meet other Marx Brothers fans, so, and celebrate. So to me, this is about not just celebrating the book's release, but celebrating the Marx Brothers. And I'm just super excited to be able to do that, just like Noah was able to do with his show.
One of the gratifying things about working on any kind of Marx Brothers project or book or social group is just how great the other fans are, the people you connect with on the basis of this shared love of these great artists. It makes worthwhile all the exhausting and exhaustive efforts that you described, that you went through to make the book happen, and that we have all gone through to contribute our little verse to the ongoing song of the Marx Brothers.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, it has been a pleasure talking to you today about this book, just as it's a pleasure to make some small contribution to it while you were working on it. And we thank you for
Man,
joining
I thank
us
you guys so much for having me on and for being so supportive. It's like you guys have been keeping the torch going for a long time, privately and publicly, and this is my coming out party as a contributor. And I really appreciate you guys letting me be a part of it. And also, I'm proud that I was able to keep up with you guys. I was really like, am I just going to be sitting there quiet the whole time because they're going to be like, they're going to know so much, and I'm just going to be like, so Salvador Dali, But yeah, so this is great. It made me feel like I actually can, I can talk shit,
Many have tried, my friend. Many have. Well, what is there left to say? But the Marx Brothers Council podcast was hosted and produced by Matthew Conium, Bob Gassell, and Noah Diamond, and edited by Bob Gassell. Today's guest, Josh Frank. You can find out all about us and our podcast at marxbrotherscouncilpodcast.com. You can find each of us on social media and say whatever you want to us. We can take it. And if you're a Marx Brothers fan, by all means, stop by the Marx Brothers Council Facebook group, from whence this podcast sprung, and where we have the internet's greatest ongoing 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week Marx Brothers party.
Yes.
In the search for music to close with, there was one obvious choice. It simply had to be.
A monkey decided that he would make up the funniest song in the world. So the monkey sang. A giraffe once played near a looking glass, and he saw his neck was dirty as he chanced to pass. With a dirty neck, he would not be seen, so he ran to get a washcloth for to wash it clean. Laugh, laugh, laugh at the gangling giraffe. He's a funny, funny sight to see. Half, half, half of the neck of one giraffe is just twice as much as it should be. Now he soon found out he couldn't reach the top, so he thought that he would try it with a pail and mop. But he could not get high enough with that, so he tried it with a scrub brush on a baseball bat. But the brush didn't work, and he then began to massage it with a broomstick and a sprinkling can. Now that still was short, so he cried, "Here goes!" And he tried it with a ladder and a fire hose. Then he climbed all night, and he climbed all day, but the top was still so very, very far away that he sighed and cried, "I give up," sobbed he, "'cause between my head and body there's too much of me." Laugh, laugh, laugh at the gangling giraffe. He's a funny sight to see. Half, half, half of the neck of one giraffe is just twice as much as it should be. But a giraffe became very angry. "That's not a funny song," he said. "Oh, dear," answered the monkey. "I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, giraffe, but I was only trying to make up the funniest song in the world." "In that case," cried the giraffe, "make up a song about a bear." So the monkey sang. Shaggy bear, saggy bear, raggy, naggy, baggy bear, hairy bear, berry bear, glary and contrary bear. When you growl as you howl, you look like a Turkish towel. Grumble-dee-growl, grumble-dee-growl, just like a dainty Turkish towel. But a bear was listening. "That song isn't funny," he grumbled. "Why not make up a song about a really funny animal? Make up a song about a kangaroo." So the monkey sang. A kangaroo's a funny thing. He hops around like an old bed spring. The color of his skin's too pale. He'd look better with stripes on his tail. A kangaroo has a kangarooish face, on which two eyes look so out of place. He is the silliest creature in the zoo, 'cause he looks so much like a kangaroo. When the monkey finished singing, the bear laughed, the giraffe laughed, but a kangaroo cried, No kangaroo would laugh at that song. Why not make up a song about a monkey? So the monkey sang. Chatterbox monkey, how much do you know? What makes a monkey chitter-chatter so? Monkey's arms are much too long. It must be that they wear them wrong. Their tails are high, their foreheads low. That's why monkeys chitter-chatter so. Chatterbox monkey, do you know your place? Why does a monkey have a funny face? Monkeys have no sense at all. They look too old to be so small. Between their ears there's too much space. That's why a monkey has a funny face. Chatterbox monkey, will you tell me please, why does a monkey like to live in trees? Monkeys eat such silly meals. They stop to pet banana peels. They always sneeze into the breeze. That's why monkeys like to live in trees. There, exclaimed the monkey. Who can say that song isn't funny? I can, replied a voice. And it was another monkey. The second monkey was very wise. Your song won't be funny as long as you make fun of a fellow creature, he said. And it's just as bad to make fun of your own kind. So why not make up a song that won't hurt anybody's feelings? Then the first monkey sang. We eat our milk and drink our bread. Iggle, biggle, wiggle, squiggle, mish-mash, goo. We wear our socks upon our head. Higgle, piggle, snaggle, sniggle, boo-la-boo. Skeedle-daddle-dee, skeedle-doodle-doo, skeedle-scoodle-noodle-noodle, mish-mash, goo. Oh, cows lay eggs and cats, wow, wow. We wishy-washy, squishy, squashy, fat, fat, boo. Horses sing and dogs meow. Tishy-tashy, slissy, slashy, choo, choo, choo. Skeedle-daddle-dee, skeedle-doodle-doo, skeedle-scoodle-noodle-noodle, fat, fat, boo. Oh, snow is hot, the sky is brown. Suchi, moochie, coochie, coochie, rat, rat, tea. And you can't stand while sitting down. Loochie, goochie, hoochie, coochie, alkazee. Skeedle-daddle-dee, skeedle-doodle-skee, skeedle-scoodle-noodle, rat-tat-tee. Oh, eyes can hear and ears can see. Ixie, pixie, hixie, chixie, latch, latch, patch. And I am you and you are me. Trixie, sixie, taxi, tixie, snitch, snitch, snatch. Skeedle-doodle-dee, skeedle-doodle-scratch, skeedle-scoodle-noodle-noodle, latch, latch, match. That song didn't hurt anybody's feelings. And the monkey thought it was the funniest song in the world. But maybe you can make up a funnier one.